Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the Improvisational Storytelling Podcast. We come to you anytime, anywhere, day or night. It is currently 12 o'clock. No, that was a lie. It's only 10. But it's late. We're tired. We're ready to sleep. But we're here for you, our audience. I'm, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
No Seth today. He still, you know what? He decided he was going to not only defend Earth, but the entire solar system today.
Yikes.
So next time you see him, thank him for his service. We are going to be reviewing, talking about our inspirations of, and just generally rating our latest story, Wings. What was it? I had it in my brain, and as soon as I started talking, I forgot it. This is the part of the podcast I love where I desperately click through my file structure to try and find the name of our latest episodes.
I didn't write it down.
You didn't write it down. All right. Wings of Change.
Oh, yeah.
This took on several different and interesting twists and turns, I feel like, throughout the episodes. We had a magic system, kind of, based around bird feathers. We had an Elysium Mount, I was going to say Mount of Olives, but that's not true. Mount Olympus, Valheim kind of situation called Goldheim. We had a city run by birds, kind of. If you haven't, we're not going to do a whole recap of the episodes here, but if you haven't listened to them, go back and listen to them. This episode will make a lot more sense. These fourth episodes are kind of, they kind of stand out by themselves. So, what did you think of this story, Reed?
Well, I liked a lot of things about it. I felt like there was the only kind of negative is that I kind of think like many of our stories, we get off on a whole lot of really great things and then don't really tie it together into a coherent story. But this one, I thought this was wonderful as far as the bird thing. It's one of my favorite. Well, it was like economic system, but the whole bird thing was really a great little unique twist.
Right.
So,
sometimes I do feel like I waste really good story elements. I'm not saying waste them on your guys' terrible ideas. That's not what I'm saying at all.
yeah.
Don't hear that in my voice. What I'm saying is I feel like I overperform on a certain thing, and then I spend too much energy on one idea. I need to come up, I think, with simpler ideas. Not necessarily that meld easier, because the whole idea is that we're trying to meld them together. But I also feel the same way. I'd probably rate this one here around a 3.
Yeah, I was a little more generous. I was like 5.
Oh, halfway there, huh? Halfway to Stephen King's The Dark Tower series. Halfway to Lord of the Rings, huh? Halfway to Wheel of Time, huh?
Or half. Yeah, half.
Half donkeyed? Absolutely. I like how it took kind of the kind of Greek twist to it, though. I say that as if you guys all saw the same thing I saw in my imagination as we were talking about this. But the lead character went from wearing kind of like your standard sort of fantasy garb. But in my brain, it went from that to kind of foot sandals and togas and robes and marble columns and, you know, like the architecture as we talked about it more, the architecture in my brain kind of shifted to a more Greco-Roman architecture style.
Okay.
With, like, you know, big tall pillars and multicolored birds kind of flying inside of them, and, you know, your sort of Roman style houses, you know, with the big windows, the doors and windows that went all the way through, with courtyards in the middle, and big tall apiaries with multicolored birds flying inside of them, you know?
My first story element on this one was Pantheon, and I had just gotten a book and was reading about assorted Norse mythology, Norse myths and stories. So I called my Goldheim was kind of patterned after my view of Asgard, with Odin and his sons, Thor as kind of the guard and gatekeeper, and then the mischief maker, the trickster Loki. I had that was Cudgel, and Kang was the Thor character, and I also liked the keepers. And they were I had in the story I had a mountain ridge that was actually a sleeping keeper. I like that.
Yeah, it's a thing I actually have to apologize to you about, Reed, because I definitely took your story element and kind of, let's say I dried it in the sun, crushed it up back into flour, and molded it into the bread of my choosing.
That's all right. We do that to each other. It's okay.
Yeah, I know, but that's one of my goals, I think, going forward, is I want to try and maintain the integrity of the people's story elements and not kind of shift them to fit my goals, you know? It's an artistic artistic muscle I need to flex more, which is taking what comes out of my fellow storytellers' mouths not as cool ideas, but as like the facts and reality of the story. So what can I do to yes and it instead of no butting it?
Oh, yeah.
You know
I
what I
see.
mean?
Yep.
What can I do to run with their idea instead of kind of, melting it down back into slag and putting it back into bars and making it into my own fun little thing and being like, hey, cool, isn't that cool how I totally changed your idea into something that I thought was cool?
It's all right. One of the things that I liked about the story is that is an element when you were you're introducing the birds.
Yeah.
Is that this was a gift from the creator to the mortals and kind of bypassed like the gods, and the keepers and the guardians and went right to these, fragile earthbound creatures. And it sort of created a little bit like of a jealousy up in Goldheim. I thought that was an interesting twist.
Yeah. We see that in, the story of our own creation. I don't know what actually caused Lucifer to decide, it was jealousy. Like I think about Morgoth in the Lord of the Rings in the Silmarillion.
Right.
And I think one of the things that caused him, one of it was his own desire to make music, but part of it was when, I don't remember the name of the god, the all-powerful god in the Silmarillion, when he showed them a vision of humans.
Oh, yeah.
All of a sudden it was like, oh, so we aren't your best thing? We aren't your final creation?
Yeah.
Well, okay, And I think that probably is what motivated a lot of the gods in our story anyways from kind of manipulating and using the birds from their original state, from their regarding them and respecting them. Instead, they manipulated them and used them for power. And I think now that we talk about it, because we at the last episode decided that the birds were kind of like the leftover power or energy from when a person goes on.
Yeah.
And I think more so they're the wisdom of that person.
Okay.
Right? So you can use the wisdom or the knowledge from somebody left over, like let's say someone in the past, like a founding father or a philosopher, and you can use that wisdom for either great good or for great harm.
Yeah.
So the gods decided to use it as harm. And even the humans, after so many years of having all the birds around, were kind of flippant with the wisdom and the power that they were given of not their ancestors, not like ancestor worship, but like the information and the power passed on from the past, which is what the birds were supposed to represent.
Yeah.
But did you notice any references, anything that you had read kind of really influenced your ideas in this?
Well, beyond the book about Norse mythology, I introduced the whole notion of, but yeah, this is the gods, but we really have a creator here that, in the beginning, and you kind of said, oh, so this is based on a book you're reading, the Bible? Yeah. And I suppose.
Do you think that as a Christian, we have to tread carefully around making up stories where we try to make a God too much like the God we believe in?
Oh, no.
I've thought about that sometimes. I've thought about when I'm working on a fantasy work or something like that. It's easier in science fiction just to ignore religion in its entirety, although Dune has taught me that that's a bad idea if I want to make good literature.
Yeah.
But it's kind of taught me to just kind of avoid the idea of a God. Even when I play D&D, I will typically, if I play a religious creature, a religious character, a cleric or a paladin or even just a character who follows a god, I will treat them more like a force, So Bahamut, the god of the lawful good god, that's not Bahamut. That's the name of a different thing. That's the name of a demon. Yeah. Anyways, I don't know any gods of D&D right now. It's late. But the lawful good, the platinum dragon. Yeah. If there's someone listening who knows, send me an email at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com and tell me what the lawful good platinum dragon is. But I'll treat him more like the manifestation of lawful good, And then if I play a wizard, like I'm playing a wizard in the campaign I'm playing right now, that's exactly how I view them. He's like a cynical, basically saying the gods are nothing more than giant wells of energy that have personified based on people's collective belief, And I've typically stayed away from, in my writing anyways, trying to like make too much of not a parody, what's it called? Aslan's Jesus? What is it called? Aslan is Jesus.
The allegory?
Allegory, that's the word. Tried to stay away from that, but do you think that that's in the right... So when I read Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe originally, and I saw that happening, I immediately was like, can't you tell a better story than having to like copy Christian beliefs? But as I've gotten older, I've realized that what better story?
Yeah. And the other thing that is, kind of, it's almost counterintuitive with the notion of embracing the idea of an all-powerful, ever-present God. When we realize that the God of the Bible, it creates a belief system that's non-predatory. And what I mean by that is it draws people, but doesn't force people. Whereas there are other belief systems that are kind of pretty much, not to say that Christians throughout time haven't fallen prey to behaving contrary to that, but there are other belief systems that are exclusionary in a way that's different, because I just see the God of the Bible doesn't need to worry about that, the all-present, all-powerful God,
right?
And isn't thwarted by somebody getting out of line, so to speak.
Right. I think especially as I have delved more into older forms of Christianity, possibly the oldest form of Christianity, and as I've delved into that, I've definitely got an appreciation for like the length of history and the radical way that there's really good stories. The church fathers of old had some crazy stories that come right out of Kaladin from the Stormlight Archives and his struggle for self-worth.
Yeah.
Right? Brandon Sanderson's Way of Kings, like Kaladin.
Lightbringer.
Yeah. Like these people, like you read about them, and then you read about like the Desert Fathers and the early Christians and the like absolute, pardon my French, but badass nature of these people, what they went through and what they were willing to go through. And you're like, I would read that book.
Yes.
That's what I'm going to try. I just finished the Dark Tower series a week or so ago, and that's what I'm going to try and read more of, because I really believe that their stories are really important. Anyways, that's a bunch of... I've been reading a lot of different things, and so my inspiration for this has been partially the Dark Tower series with the disillusionment of reality, and then the Homer's Odyssey and stuff like that. That's been kind of my... And then just the crazy... I had that idea with the birds like weeks before.
Yeah.
And it was just like, I got economic system, and I'm like, I'm doing the birds. And then Wingspan, the board game, which we've been playing a bunch.
Yeah.
So that's been really cool too. That's what's been getting me on birds, actually. Before I was like, birds are, the CIA runs them. The CIA, they're fake.
Yeah.
But we've been playing Wingspan a lot. My family has, and it's been really, I've been really thinking about the old birds again.
One of the things that I really like when our stories, when we do a better job of setting of like the the Goldheim, that had kind of a setting, kind of in the frozen waste,
right?
And then but you were talking about, see, I also had that same picture of these robed sandal wearing characters living in marbled halls and pillared porticos and that kind of thing, and that's sort of what the Jason the Stonecutter had, the stone house, the castle on the top of the sea face cliff, and he was from a long line of stone cutters and masons, and he supplied these great pillars and blocks and whatnot, and the house that he had lower levels, wine cellars and whatnot, and as they delved, they discovered caves, open spaces that had fissures in the cliff face that birds could access, and he had this in the basement levels of his house where it was literally an aviary where birds had taken up residence, and I felt like there could have been a better way to weave his part into the story, but I didn't see it.
Yeah, I'll admit I got a little bit irritated at him because he seemed like a jack of all trades. Like he was this great guy, and he like could do bird things, and he was like a master at this thing. So I guess I like purposely ignored him. Not purposely, I think I subconsciously ignored him because like I don't kin much to Deus Ex Machina, and he was supposed to be an anti-hero, and I wasn't really getting anti-hero vibes from him.
Yeah, because he had a nice life, and I had a thread for it, but I didn't develop it right.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, sometimes your things really catch my imagination, and that's the thing I need to work on is getting the old imagination running, whether it catches or not. But I definitely am guilty of just saying, "Oh, that's a bad idea" in my brain, and just never bringing it up again.
Yeah.
This whole thing. That's why I gave it a 3, because this whole story I felt like was a bit of a struggle to get through.
Okay.
And, there was a certain amount of, we weren't writing, but there was a certain amount of writer's block for like, what's next?
Mm-hmm.
What's next? What's next? Sometimes the stories just flow and flow and flow. It's just idea after idea, and each one connects together, and it's just this kind of beautiful thing. And I feel like this is one of those ones that's not that way.
Yep.
So.
And we missed Seth, too, for the last episode.
Right.
So.
Right. And that is unfortunate. Oftentimes he brings in those little things that capture my imagination in a way. I am I was going to say a string of consciousness writer, a discovery writer when it comes to writing. So it's like if inspiration doesn't hit, I'm sitting in front of the computer with my fingers on the keys looking at a blank page for 30 minutes,
Right.
So you guys need to provide me with good fuel. But anyways, so this one's kind of short and sweet, a little bit disappointing, but I think I've learned some things from this. I think you're right about the whole setting thing. I think maybe we need to make setting a semi-permanent first episode element.
Yeah. That could be.
Like right now we have 3 sections of story elements, a first episode, a second episode, and a third episode. And maybe we need to make one that's much smaller that's a first episode to really kind of hammer out more groundwork. And I think we need to make, instead of goal, I think goal needs to be one of them, but I think it needs to be end goal. To be like, this is where the story will conclude. Then wherever we start, we can shoot towards the end.
Yeah, I have to say, I've not been comfortable anytime I've drawn goal. I haven't been comfortable with that story element because I like to see it unfold. I don't know how to explain my antipathy to it, but
yeah. So when you think of stories, like if you were going to write a story,
Yeah.
do you think of action scenes in the middle, how it gets off, or how it ends up? Because I see how it begins, and I can kind of infer scenes in the middle, but how it ends up always is a thing that comes to me at a rush once I've filled in the beginning and the middle. And I feel like that in and of itself stalls me, because with no end in sight, what are we working towards?
Yeah.
We're basically nihilists at that point. We're just saying nothing's going to happen at the end.
I also have a real strong affinity for when someone draws the story element history. Placing things in context, and how did we get where this story takes place? And that's why I love when we do sequels and stuff, or prequels, and because I just like filling in that connective tissue.
Right. That's interesting. So it's not how the story starts, but it's what setting in which the story starts. What are people's assumptions about the world?
Right.
That's interesting, Reed. That's good to know.
Yeah.
That's good to know. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we're going to call it there. If you like this story, if you thought, hey, Levi, you should have given it a 10. Reed, you should start writing it right now. Send us an email. Let us know that at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com. If you thought, yeah, this one should kind of be struck from the annals of history, let me know. Send me a message on Twitter.
Well,
at @getsbettercast.
Just wait. It gets better.
Yeah, and don't forget to wait, because it gets better. Thanks, guys. Bye.